the Prime Minister during his briefing in the Parliament. I am aware of the need to involve Parliament on coronavirus, thus began at 15 and then at 17:30 in the chamber. His information to the Senate, the Prime Minister, Giuseppe Conte. The government is aware of the need to strengthen prevention systems, continued Conte, and the buffer is the only certain tool for identifying the virus. The Immune Hub. The Prime Minister explained that the government aims to strengthen the strategy of mapping existing contacts and remote assistance with the use of new technology, basically to track who has already had coronavirus. The Immune app, which has been discussed in these days, will be used. Tracking, explained Conte, is necessary to avoid the spread of the virus. But its use will be on a voluntary basis and there will be no limitation for those who do not download it. The Prime Minister resolved the doubts that arose after the morning's statements by the Extraordinary Commissioner Domenico Arcuri, who there spoke of the voluntary nature of installing Immune on smartphones. The use of masks. In phase 2, the Prime Minister reiterated that social distancing must continue to be respected and widespread use of personal protective equipment will be promoted until therapy or vaccine is available. As long as they are not there, you will have to use masks, but says the Prime Minister, there will be changes on social distancing. Phase 2. In his information to the Senate, the Prime Minister addressed the issue of reopening and the end of isolation at homes for Italian citizens. We must proceed with a relaxation of the measures, he said, and in this way we can preserve the productive fabric. The country's aging must start again, but we need an articulated plan. In case of acceleration on the beginning of phase 2, in fact, the risk is of a resurgence of the infections from COVID-19. The imprudence at this stage can compromise the sacrifices made so far. But how will the reopening take place? First, the regions least affected by the virus and then others. Homogeneous openings are planned on the national basis, explained the Premier, all at the same time then. The economic crisis. The closure of workplace and forced isolation have created a crisis situation. The Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte stressed this by saying that the emergency affects the most fragile groups and the interventions planned so far are not enough. There is the risk of creating new poverty. For this reason, economic interventions must be inclusive. The government is therefore preparing for new appropriation for economic support for families and businesses. A new law decree, this time with an injection of 50 billion euros. The government will send a further report to the Parliament very soon with a request for budgetary deviation, said Conte, of 50 billion euros with a total intervention which hadn't the previous 25 billion. Then during the information to the chambers with respect to the redundancy fund, he said, I take the liberty of urging the regions that have not sent the flow of requests to send them as soon as possible, otherwise we will not be able to pay the redundancy fund. The mess. It is inevitable for President Conte not to address the issue of European measures to support the crisis caused by the pandemic in the Senate. The European Union and the Eurozone cannot afford to repeat the mistakes made in the 2008 financial crisis when a common response could not be given, said Conte. It is a risk, he continued, that we cannot afford to run because failure to produce an adequate and courageous response would cause serious damage to the European project itself. Then on the mess, the so-called State Savings Fund, refusing the credit lines it offers would be wrong to other countries, but Italy needs something else. The MES criteria are unacceptable due to the nature of this crisis. Words that have eased the mood of the opposition with representatives of the party who protested both in the Senate and in the chamber with screams against the word of the Prime Minister forced to interrupt his information for a few minutes. Then, Conte announcement. There are 8 other countries in the European Union willing to take new economic support measures. We will not accept a downward compromise. We need to build an economic recovery fund to tackle the crisis. A measure that must comply with the treaties because we do not have time to modify them. It must be managed at European level without bilateral character. It must be much more consistent than the current instrument, aimed at facing all the social and economic consequences immediately available, and if it will falling within the multi-annual financial framework, must be available immediately through guarantees that anticipate its application, said Conte. Words that bring the government closer to the President Macron lines. We are available to support France's proposal on bonds, having asked to integrate it in order to respond more punctually to the requirements that we believe are essential. Finally, a Spanish proposal was presented which, however, but with some suggestions for variation, we could support for its compliance with our purpose. The Prime Minister then explained what the Italian proposal is to the EU, even if it has not yet been presented officially. The idea of the head of government is that of a solidarity fund managed by the EU Commission with the implicit guarantee of the EU budget, but included guarantees from municipalities in all the member states, guarantees which in the Italian proposal are defined as. Before any EU support measure, before being accepted, Conte assured to the Parliament, which will have the last word.